Welcome back to the Nick Fit Studios podcast. I'm Jack Ryan.
And I am Katie Tan.
And that's our third take of our intro. Seamless.
We think we'd have these intros down by now.
Yeah, but we're here, without a guest, so we're kind of like when the teacher leaves the room.
We're getting the giggles.
Yeah, the fit of the giggles is definitely when I've got put down in front of the principal. I feel like I can't stop.
We might laugh our way through this one. So we are here today to talk about protein and training and all the reasons why we encourage all of our clients to eat protein, why it's important, where you get it, and just kind of talk through that topic really.
Yep.
So the first thing we're going to discuss today is why protein is important. So most people that train with us would have been told at some point along their journey that upping their protein intake or getting an adequate protein intake is really important. And a lot of people outside of the gym will also know that, but a lot of people maybe don't have the right information as to why it's important. So the number one really is so that we can maintain and sustain the amount of muscle mass we have and hopefully grow some new muscle tissue.
Yeah, so it's what our body uses to grow muscle, and it's what our body needs to retain muscle in the fat loss phase. So we are always talking about calorie deficits on this podcast. Calorie deficit being super important, but protein intake becomes really vital in that situation because your body, we're talking about fat loss, not weight loss. Weight loss and fat loss are slightly different in that we don't want to lose body weight just for the sake of it. We want to lose body fat. So in order to maintain our lean tissue, our muscle mass, that's where protein comes in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people don't realize before they join a gym, before they educate themselves around these areas, is that having more muscle burns more calories. So that's why, like, genetically, men generally will burn more calories than women in most cases because they'll just be holding a lot more muscle mass. And as we age or as we diet or as life goes by, we tend to lose muscle mass. So people will burn calories at a lower rate as time goes by, especially if they're not looking at these things. So that's why it's really important to build muscle so that we are burning more calories every day when we do nothing. Or if fat loss is our goal, not losing the muscle while the fat loss happens. Like you said, Jack, there's a big difference between weight loss and fat loss. And if we can lose loads of fat but hold on to our muscle mass while we do it, we are then going to be able to always keep burning calories at the same rate, as opposed to letting that calorie expenditure slow down because we're losing muscle mass along the way.
And it also help to maintain performance as well in the gym because your weight training, your strength training is probably the most important thing when it comes to fat loss or maintaining muscle, whichever your goal is, or perhaps a combination of both. And it's just really important that you can just maintain that protein, that high protein when you're training 3 days a week. So that strength training is so important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in a calorie deficit or if fat loss is the goal, which it is for most people who enter gyms in the beginning anyway, we have to address the amount of protein we're taking in so that we don't lose that muscle mass, and it's also high relative to our amount of calories that we're having so that we stay kind of full and all that kind of stuff. So as we go on, we will explain a little bit more about that. But the main thing to think of when you're going into a calorie deficit is that no amount of protein will prevent muscle loss if the calorie deficit is too strong. So that's the first thing. So that's why crash dieting or really hard dieting can result in muscle wastage even if the protein levels are really good. I think sometimes people make that misconception because they know, okay, if I train and I eat loads of protein, I won't lose any muscle, but a calorie deficit too strong will actually cause muscle wastage regardless of your macronutrient breakdown. And then also weightlifting is the best thing and the number one thing to prevent muscle wastage. So again, if you are someone who's addressing diet only and you are eating the right amount of calories, you're in a calorie deficit, you're eating the right amount of protein, but you are not stimulating that muscle mass regularly, protein it can waste as well. So it's in order of importance, weight training is number one. So if you're trying to change your body composition and hold on to muscle, make sure you're weight training. Number two is making sure that you're not in too much of a calorie deficit. So how much, the rate in which we lose weight is really important, not just losing weight. And then number three is making sure that protein intake is right. And that's kind of what we're looking at today is that protein intake, how we get it.
That hierarchy of importance is so important to understand because that's why when we get clients first into the gym, all we want them to do is hit their 3 strength training sessions a week because that's going to get the ball rolling. It's the most important thing. And then you work your way down the list. Calorie deficit next. If the protein intake isn't perfect at that stage, that's absolutely fine. And then you start honing in on the protein, especially as someone starts to get stronger. They're putting themselves under more load consistently. That's when the protein intake really becomes vital, especially as you're looking to lose fat.
So when working out macros or working out how much fats, carbs, protein we should be having, there's like a few different ways of doing it. Sometimes there's like percentages, so doing 30% of one, 35% of another. But what we do for protein intake is we'll go on body weight because someone's body weight can be very different. So depending on whether someone is really, really overweight, obviously that might just be way too much protein for that person to achieve, and they might not necessarily need that. So we work the other two out on percentages, but we work protein out based on someone's body weight, or maybe their desired body weight. So if you're listening to this and you are extremely overweight, you would work it out on kind of your desired body weight. Or what we do in the gym is we have an in-body which shows what someone's target weight should generally be, so we can generally work it out off that. So for example, if somebody is 100 kilos, we would then multiply their body weight in kilos by, there's a range, so we're talking 1.5 grams per kilogram right up to like 2.7, 2.8, even 3, depending on the person, depending on their training age. But what we always advise people, especially when they're brand new or if they're trying to get a baseline, is try not be too low, because that's the main thing. We want to get out of protein deficiency, which most people are in when we first meet them, just because the world is very convenient and everything is grab and go, and a lot of that is not protein based food. So we want to be kind of a 1.5, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
So if you're 100 kilos, you'd be wanting to aim for a minimum of 150 grams of protein, 160 grams of protein and up. And then that range goes up, so the more trained you are, the higher amounts of protein you probably should and could be eating. But it also is like, there's no real, you should just be eating as much as you can. So there is a negative to eating too little, which is muscle wastage, which we've talked about. But if you're in that kind of right category, sometimes people ask me, okay, well, I'm kind of getting my 1.6. Do I have to have 1.8 or 2? Or what's the benefit of having a higher amount? From like holding onto your muscle mass, there's not like huge benefits to having loads more, but having higher protein does make you way fuller. It also makes you have way more diet satisfaction. You feel like you're full, satisfied, not craving as much. It also, like you said, can fuel training, make you feel...
that satiation is so important, because it'll stave off cravings. It'll make you feel like you're enjoying your meals a bit more, you're getting a little bit more out of them, and it's just better calories for your system as well, because your system is a little bit deprived when you're in a calorie deficit. It just needs that little bit of satiation. And again, from a strength training point of view, especially as you progress in the gym, the more loads you put your body under, and the more frequency of that load, the more your body is going to need protein to recover. So someone like Katie and I, who train strength training regularly, aiming for about 2 grams per kilo of body weight is the range we'd be going for. And then there, higher performance athletes like rugby players, NFL players, Olympic weightlifters would be shooting even higher, maybe 2.5, because their demands they're placing on their body and on their muscles and on their soft tissue is so much higher. So it's all relative as well to the level that you're
it really
training
helps
at.
Like you said, with fatigue, when you're training, people kind of report that they recover quicker and they feel less stress on their body when their protein levels are adequate. And you also have to remember, like, if you're training in order to improve your body composition, like, there has to be an element, the right amount of calories to sustain that, to have fuel. And that's where carbs and fats come in, and they're really important, because once you have your protein target nailed, if your overall calories are just too low, you can't actually fuel your workouts correctly. And when you can't fuel your workouts correctly, you can't actually put enough stimulus on your muscles in the first place. So that's why someone who might come to us who has a very sedentary lifestyle, a very low amount of calorie intake in general, will do much better from trying to like eat more, move more, rather than just looking at protein and keeping the calories where they are, because there needs to be a certain amount of workload we can actually put on our body for change to happen. And sometimes, having too low calories in general is just going to leave you with not enough energy to perform well in the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. The eat more, move more is a really interesting concept, because again, it just seems to go against what a lot of people think when they come into the gym. They just have to start eating less. The more you fuel your body, the harder your workouts can be. Again, like Katie referenced earlier, the thermic effect of just having more body mass on you, more muscle, that is, it's going to lead to you losing weight even when you're just sitting on the couch, because your body just needs more calories to just exist.
Yeah, and that's like, it just changes depending on who the person is. These are all very much like, if you are in general shape and you are not like extremely overweight or extremely inactive, these are kind of good figures to base from. But somebody, for example, who might be extremely overweight and has never done any training, they might be looking at things like insulin resistance from having a really high carbohydrate. So they might do better on a low carbohydrate diet. Like, it does get very individualized when people come in, but there is just basic rules of thumb that people miss and they just skip and they just don't address it. And that's kind of what we want to chat about today, especially for some of our clients that might be listening. You go in and out of phases of like putting all your attention into the stuff and then going through phases where you're just not. And it's just like a gentle reminder to like remember how important
with the protein
deficiency
like, again, the kind of grab and go culture that we live in, we want to go through some ideas of how you might change your meals without it being very drastic. It's not that you have to change your whole lifestyle and start incorporating these mad foods or mad meals into your routine. It can be incredibly simple. We even have a few examples written down there, and even just the way myself and yourself eat, Katie, it's nothing really special. It's nothing different from what you might see in a normal household.
And just before we started, like you said, you're like, oh, I eat 2 of these yogurts every single day, and it's just a habit you're in, and that's the thing. It's like it shouldn't feel like you're doing something extremely hard all the time. It's just, and I think that's the same with everything, right? The reason you join a gym is because you just want to change your overall habits so that you're doing things that add up in the long term to benefit you. And it's the same with food. I think it's something that people get really, really bogged down on, and it doesn't always have to look perfect. Your numbers don't always have to be perfect. But if you kind of like set yourself up to eat in a way that generally guides you in the right direction in terms of getting the right stuff, then you can actually sit back and forget about it. So like you said, we probably look at our food the least out of most of our clients. We don't track, we don't do these things because we've spent a long time changing around habits so that you're eating in that way generally, you know. And then look, we're all human, so we all go off track here and there. But places to get protein, so that's the next thing, because a lot of people kind of say, where do you even start? Like what's protein in? Some people have no clue about macronutrients. So one of the main obvious ones would be meat, and a lot of people, especially these days, a lot of people don't eat meat, which is fine. There's still absolutely so many places to get protein. It's easier obviously when you eat meat because they give you the most bang for buck in terms of calorie or protein intake. But things like meats, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, all those kind of things. And as I went down the list there, the amount of protein that is in each source kind of starts to get smaller, but they still all have protein. So even changing your rice to chickpeas, you know, that makes a difference to your overall, or changing your 1 chicken breast to 1.5 instead of having, you know, a little few slices of chicken from ham. It makes all a big difference. So when you think about all of your meals throughout the whole day, rather than just, right, it's dinner time, I need to get protein, where am I going to get it? And that's kind of how people make the big change, and starting to think about and readdress all of their meals.
And then even things like where the exact sources of, like you're citing meat as an example, like a fatty cut of steak versus a lean chicken breast, you're going to get maybe 30 grams of protein in both, but the fatty piece of steak has 50 grams of fat, whereas the lean chicken breast has 5 grams of fat. So you're getting more bang for your buck. Katie, you mentioned that. So essentially what that means is, let's say you're getting 30 grams of protein from a chicken breast, but 30 grams of protein also from a steak. The steak may be 400 or 500 calories. Chicken breast is probably only around 150 or 200. So again, just making slightly smarter choices within that range as well, or like a white fish instead of an oily fish, or if you don't like eggs, maybe going for like an egg white or some kind of egg substitute can be a really good option as well. And just a little thing on nuts, so nuts and peanut butter and things like that, a lot of people will see that as a protein source, and although they do contain protein, they are incredibly high in calories. They're densely fat. Now, they could be really good sources of fat. It's not unhealthy, but just something that people have to be aware of. If you're lumping peanut butter into your porridge, you're probably adding 200 calories.
As you were talking there, I was like, we better talk about how many calories are in each thing. So there are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate and protein, but there's 9 calories per gram of fat. And most people who have less knowledge about food will come and be like, I do eat loads of protein, I don't know why I'm not losing weight, especially when we're talking about calorie deficit and high protein. Like, there's the kind of where we really have to look at the fat intake, because what happens is if we're eating eggs and bacon and salmon and, you know, like you said, the nut butters, yes, they do contain protein, but they also contain a lot of fat. And cause fat, when it comes to calorie deficit, is the kind of one that people avoid the most, because you eat less food, you take in more calories, right? People will start to avoid it. And with fat, just while we're talking about it, we'll probably do another podcast on carbs and fats after this. Fat's important. It's important not to have too little of it, but when it comes to a calorie deficit, it is the one that's going to get taken the hit the most. So it is worth looking at to make sure you're not deficient in it. But it is also, if you are wondering why you can't lose weight or why your calorie deficit is really hard, it's probably usually that you're eating too many foods that are high in fat. So I wonder, could I put a little graphic on this video? I might do it after. I have a really good one that kind of shows, like, here's protein foods, here's fat foods, and here's the ones that kind of fall in the middle. And they're the ones I usually would guide people, like, have one of them a day. So if you're having salmon for dinner, maybe don't have the fattier version, so don't have the eggs for breakfast and the nuts and the cheeses and stuff in your lunch. Go for one kind of more fatty version, so you are still getting your fat intake, but then go for the leaner options. So leaner options might be like your white meats, which would be like low in fat, low in carbs, really high in protein. Turkey
and chicken are phenomenal. A lot of white fish is really good. Another great tip when you are doing supermarket shopping is to simply even turn it over and just look at the label, because it's all there. You can scan it on MyFitnessPal as well, and it'll give you the exact calorie and macro breakdown, because a lot of products nowadays will use the buzzword protein to draw you in. But if you're buying, not to drop a name brand here, other bars are available, but those Nature Valley bars that have protein written across them, but they're 250 calories and it's 10 grams of protein, you know?
Yeah,
so it's like just being a little bit wiser with when you're looking at your choices, like, okay, you're picking up this packet of bacon or this packet of turkey bacon, and just have a look and see the difference for yourself.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, because I think people do forget you can actually literally just turn it over and have a look, and then the apps make it even simpler. You can scan the code, and then you're just much more on top of what you're actually taking in, as opposed to looking at it and thinking, well, this is a protein source, so this is a protein source. You're just taking the guesswork out of it, and then you can do your shopping based off of that.
Yeah, because when you're looking only at one thing, you ignore the others. Like when the sugar became the big thing, everything was like low in sugar, and then we all realized, oh, it's actually all really high in fat because they're making it tasty other ways. And that's a good point. And what you said there about scanning it, that's something that I would always advise, is scan something and see what carbs, fats and protein in it, and whatever it has the most of, it's a that based food. So if it has 20 grams of protein, 5 grams of fat, 6 grams of carbs, it's a protein based food. So that's kind of where you want to be getting most of your protein. Whereas if you scan chickpeas or peanut butter, there'll be more of the other stuff. So there'll be more carbs in chickpeas, there'll be more fat in peanut butter. So it's a fat based food with a bit of protein. So we're trying to get as many protein based foods into our day as we can. And if there are people listening to this that maybe don't eat the big bang for your bucks, the meats, the supplementation is there for you. It has very low carbs, very low fat, really high amounts of protein. And I think people get a little bit nervous. We were just having a chat about this. They kind of say, oh, you know, what's the story with protein powder? Am I allowed to take that? It literally is a supplement.
It's a food supplement. It's something you take to supplement your diet. And there are so many companies out there now. If I was to buy protein, I'd be getting off something like My Protein or one of the big bags. You can get them incredibly good value. There's also a misconception that these kinds of things are expensive. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't be buying a tub of protein that costs 50 quid and you're only getting 20 servings. It's not really worth it. So it's something that's just a really, especially if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, like one of our coaches here in the gym is a vegan, and I know he can struggle with protein intake, so he really prioritizes that. But the word supplement is the key. It is supplemental. It should not form the basis of your diet, nor should protein bars. I think protein bar culture, they kind of grab a coffee and a protein bar, as great as that can be in a hurry, these kind of things are very much supplemental to a whole food diet, a diet of high satiating, nutritious food. And then the supplements can just... And
we get asked that a lot, don't we? Like, should I be taking a protein supplement? And the answer is, well, do you get enough protein? If someone says no, then you probably should. While you're working on food. The only reason it's more beneficial to eat food than have a protein supplement is because you'll just be fuller. You know, so you're less likely to get hungrier because you're eating it.
It's a trade-off. It's a high satiating food versus something that isn't. I mean, sipping on a whey protein shake, if you're someone who's incredibly busy and you're on the move, that's really, really handy. It probably saves you from going in and grabbing something from the shop. You're not going to feel great. You're not going to feel amazing after. You're probably going to still look at the steak that someone else is eating and think, geez, I'd love that now. But it's just something that can be on the go, really, really handy.
And that's why if you do eat meat or all these kind of nice things we've been talking about, and there's an option there, that's why you would lean towards eating, because you're more likely to stay full. But I think there's that kind of, I'd like to see that gone now, is that kind of idea that protein powder is bad for you, or it's kind of like something that you only take when you go to the gym. It's more like people who start going to the gym realize how important keeping their muscle mass is.
It's just a tool in the toolbox. I personally don't ever use protein powders because they don't really agree with my system.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Some people will have issues with whey or dairy or those kind of things, and that would be a reason. And for the same reason, they probably shouldn't eat a huge amount of things that have normal whey or dairy or any of those kind of things in it. And everybody's body is different. But like that, it's good. It's good to take anything that you need that you have a deficiency in to supplement in it. But don't just take it for the sake of it. Make sure you actually have a deficiency first. It's not just a buzz thing. I go to the gym, so I take my protein shake. If you're deficient in it, it's a great way to get the numbers up while you're working on figuring out your whole intake. As I always say, you're more likely to have some vegetables with your chicken than you are with a protein shake, so it is good to try get it through food, because we can kind of use the combinations of food to get a nice versatile diet, as opposed to I had a protein bar and protein shake and I'm sorted, whereas my nutritional value from that, there isn't much. So that would be why I would err people on the side of make a big salad with loads of nice protein stuff in it, so that you can get all the other benefits from all the other foods. It's very easy to pick up a coffee and a protein bar. I'm a fan of it myself. But you got to make sure it's not becoming all of your meals. So little ways that we can kind of change our diets, quite simple ways, because it seems like this big mountain to climb when you first look into it. But there's little ways that you can change it, and we would always encourage, if you track your food and you're having about 60 grams of protein at the moment, aim for 70 for the next week, then aim for 80. Like, I know the number you're aiming for might be 100 or might be 150 or whatever your goal is, but just increase it over time. There is this little point as well that people don't realize, is that when you start eating a new higher amount of protein, it does take a while for your body to be able to digest that new amount of protein. So there is this transitional phase of, I feel really bloated and really sluggish, and and what usually happens is I don't like how I'm feeling, so I revert back to how I was eating before it, and they go, oh, protein, doesn't really agree with me. But it can take from 3 days to 14 days, depending on the person, to develop this new kind of, your body will just kind of get used to that level of protein, and it'll just start burning it, breaking it down much quicker. So do stick to it and build it up, but add 10 grams each week or every 2 weeks and just build it up.
It's the same as you would in the gym with your weights. You wouldn't pop 50 kg on the bar. You do 2.5 or 5 kg every single week, and you slowly build it up. It's just the very same idea.
And food changes, whether it's protein or anything, should always be like that, because we're trying to change our overall lifestyle, our overall thought process, our overall go-tos. What we have in our fridge each week should look different when we're eating right to when we're not. So it's about making these small changes. So I just did a little sample A. So an average person might go for something like this. So 2 eggs in the morning with some toast, then they might have a banana as a snack. Then they might do a chicken sandwich for lunch with a bit of mayo or cheese or something like that. Maybe a spaghetti bolognese for dinner, 2 pieces of garlic bread, and then after dinner a little treat, which is all allowed within our calories, a nice little bar of dairy milk with a cup of tea, and they're done for the day. They're happy out. They're still in their calorie deficit. They've had 1,800 calories, and that works out at about 87 grams of protein. So we've now told this client 1,800 calories is perfect. That's exactly what we should be aiming for. You're getting your fruit in, you're having your eggs, you're having all. So on the grand scheme of things, it doesn't look bad, right? It's not that it's bad, but here's little tweaks we could make to that diet to make it a little bit better in terms of protein. And actually, when I made these changes and I put it into my fitness the calories are actually 150 calories lower, but there's more food. So I'd way rather option B here than option one.
That's where the satiation comes in. Even though you're eating less, you're feeling more satiated.
And usually when you're thinking about putting more protein in, what happens as a byproduct is the fat content or maybe the carb content just naturally comes down a bit. But we have to remember, people focus way too much on taking carbs out and they forget to replace it. So it's I was having a chicken sandwich, but now I'm just going to have a little bit of chicken, but they forget they're not going to be full. The bread was filling them. They have to have more chicken or have more of the other stuff that is going to fill them, rather than just taking out, try replace. So instead of your 2 eggs with toast in the morning, you might have 2 eggs with 2 egg whites and make it into a nice veggie omelette. There you're getting more nutrients. You're getting a bigger, wholesomer, more full meal, because those egg whites really buff it up. And all of a sudden now that omelette is going to fill you a lot more than the eggs on toast. Also more nutritional value. You can still have your banana, so you're still getting your nice, good, healthy fruit snack, but you're going to have it with one of these. What's the brand? Yogurt?
Broccoli from Aldi.
Broccoli.
We're hoping for our sponsorship to come through these days.
So
all the coaches in Nickfit eat them.
Yeah, you should. If you come into Nickfit and open the fridge, there's just tons.
You will see many of them. But all jokes aside, if you add into something small, and these things are incredibly cheap if you shop in any of the shops around. Super Value and Tesco have their own brand, and Aldi and Lidl have their own ones. They're usually about 99 cents. They are between 15 and 25 grams of protein depending on the brand, usually between 100 and 150 calories, and they're incredibly dense in protein, good amino acid profile and everything, so they're very bioavailable, and you eat 1 or 2 of them a day. Even just one, as Katie has cited here, you're not bumping your calories up massively. In fact, you're probably overall reducing it, because it's a nice satisfying snack. They taste really nice,
and eat one of them.
It tastes like any fruit yogurt.
I see Jack Saunders eating 2 in a row, and I'm how can you eat that much yogurt? They're so filling. He loves them, but they're just so filling, so you're not going to get hungry that quickly after them, because they do actually
a delicious snack that I do is I'll take 2 of those, and they may be strawberry flavour. They are genuinely really, really tasty. 2 of those in a bowl with a very tiny bit of granola and blueberries. It's an incredible snack. It's about 350 calories.
That's the thing. And just even with this, I was doing it out, I was would you have to replace the banana with the yogurt? Because but actually when you put them all in together, you're way fuller. You still get all the same kind of calories. So you could add your banana and your yogurt together there. That yogurt's giving you 25 grams of protein in your snack. So now all of a sudden it's not even afternoon and you've already got a good amount of protein. So then we're changing our chicken sandwich at lunch to maybe a chicken salad. But if you think about a chicken sandwich, you have a few slivers of chicken in it, right? But if you take away the bread, all of a sudden you're not going to be full. So you got to really bump up. So if you go for a full chicken breast there and mix it in with some leaves, some veggies, to me that it's you're taking away the kind of gluten-y bread source, and bread's absolutely fine, but you're taking away the bread and replacing it with veg and more protein. So that's a really nice little change that can.
And this is another thing, that if you go to somewhere where we have lots of coffee shops around where we live and really enjoy going in, but they're advertised their sandwich menu, but in almost all cases sandwich places will have a box option. Instead, you can take the sandwich or whatever it is you're ordering, but put it in a box instead. So there's and the same with the burrito, the same with a few other easily bought sandwich foods. The sandwich can just be turned into something else really, really easily. You remove the bread, again, not that there's anything wrong with bread, but it's just very high in calories. So if you take that out, you may even be able to pair it with a pasta or something like that is a little bit of a carb hit, but it's just overall reducing the calories. and you can bump more chicken in, because I know for a fact every time I've done that in any sandwich place I've ever gone, they do tend to put more chicken in the box than they will in the sandwich, because you can only fit so much into a sandwich.
So much, yeah. And that's the thing I find with the sandwich, like you said, it's not the bread's bad, the carbs are bad, the carbs are good, and depending on the person, some people will need the sandwich every day rather than salad because they'll need more energy, and we'll go down that road when we talk about carbs. But what happens with the sandwich is, like, who's going to eat chicken sandwich with nothing else in it? You know, you need cheese, you need mayo, you need some good stuff to make it moist, whereas if you get a nice good chicken salad, all of a sudden that veg is making it so moist, it's actually really nice. You can get a bit of spicy sauce on it. Like, I would much prefer it, and when you know the bang for buck is so much better, it makes so much more sense. So dinner then, I've kept dinner the same, so you can still have your big spaghetti bolognese with your 2 slices of garlic bread, so we're getting our good carb intake at dinner there. We didn't need as much of it in our breakfast and lunch because we're getting a big source now in our dinner. And then instead of the dairy milk in the evening, I'm going to have my full protein bar, so I'm still getting that chocolate hit with my cup of tea, but instead of no protein, I'm getting 20 grams of protein. So even though you're still kind of trying to get the same out of it, we all know dairy milk's nicer than fulfill, let's not lie, but we have goals here, you know, we're trying to work towards something. So fulfill, and like that, I would enjoy it fulfill just as much, because sometimes it's more about the snack than it is about the hunger, you know. And now we're looking at, instead of 1800 calories, we're looking at more food, but we're looking at 1700 calories. I forgot to write it down, but it's 145 grams of protein compared to the 85 that was in our first day. They don't look too much different, and if anything, you're getting just as full, if not more full, off the second one, because what we've done there is we've taken out the toast from breakfast, packed in a load of veg, we've taken the bread out of lunch, we've packed in a load of bread, and we've still got that nice big carb intake in our dinner. So it's just nice little ways to change around. Anyone listening to this, even if you're like well versed in how much protein you usually eat, it's always good, especially if you're not tracking, to just track a day or two and just reinvestigate, because protein, when you're not concentrating on it or not thinking about it, it just falls out, because it takes preparation, it takes thought. You can't just open your fridge and all this like nice protein based foods are ready to go. You got to kind of prepare.
They need to be cooked.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are someone who doesn't eat meat, you know, you might have to look into it a little bit more, or make sure you are getting enough of those protein. Your levels might be a bit lower than someone who doesn't eat meat, but we're just going to bump it up with that protein supplement. Or if you're a porridge eater, a nice thing to do is those overnight oats, add in your protein powder the night before. Or some people just don't like it in the porridge, just have a shake with your porridge. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be in. Or if you're producer Danielle and you like a nice little stack of protein pancakes.
There you go.
And that's a lovely way to eat, you know, because you're still getting all the same nutrients, but it's in a, like, I love eating things that are more enjoyable to actively eat. You know, you get to cut them and put things on them, and
the experience of eating, like, I think it's really important as well, that it's not just too efficient. Again, we have our coffee and our protein bar sometimes when we're on the go, but or our protein shake in a lot of people's cases, but in general, having something where you actually sit down, no phone, maybe chatting to a friend, or even just by yourself listening to some music, you have a little bit more of a better time, and that overall enjoyment of your meal comes up. I know we're talking about protein here, but where it's all tied into our whole kind of food habits. If you're eating while you're walking, or if you're eating on the go, like on a phone call or looking at a YouTube video, it's kind of passing you by. And the mental side of eating is not being, you're maybe physically taking the food in, but you're not enjoying it. I think a huge amount to be said for actually sitting down, like Katie says, with your salad at lunchtime and eating it properly. In the morning, making your omelette, a little bit of prep time. It's actually, you may see it as a nuisance, but it can become something that's actually super enjoyable. It's maybe 10 or 15 minutes of headspace that you might not get if you just slap something together.
Yeah, you get a bit of a buzz off taking the time out to actually look after yourself. It feels good, you know. Absolutely. You're like, I could have let that slip by, grab something, gone, but instead I created time, and that unfortunately is what it takes. You have to actually create the time. I'm a busy mum, if I don't create the time, I won't eat well. It's just as simple as that, because eating well takes time, takes moments out of your day to sit down and think about what you're having, and then eventually you'll start to eat naturally like that. You'll grab things that are a little bit more in the right direction. But when it comes to prepping, little tricks that I have found really helpful with protein, especially if you do eat meat, is like maybe having some of those pre-made microwave meals from NutriQuick, or those kind of things that you know have the 40 grams of protein in them. They're there for a quick day. If you are someone that like just to work a lot, or you're busy or on the go, those microwave meals can be a great way to just get the right amount of protein without it having to be something that you grab in a shop. Also, Kerrigan's, that meat company, you can order online, they deliver the next day. They do these like oven bags, so it's like a bag with 6 chicken breasts in it with like a really nice spicy marinade, and you put it into the oven. 6 of them get cooked in whatever time, half an hour, and they're all really juicy. They freeze really well, so then if you do any kind of like preparing in advance, it's not just like a dry, bland chicken breast. It's full of juice, full of moisture, full of flavour, and it makes eating these kind of healthier foods nice. Like, put seasoning on stuff, like dress it up, make it tasty.
Seasoning, and a good spice rack can get you a long way.
Absolutely.
So like you're saying, it's such an important point, the 6 chicken breasts. If you're cooking 2 chicken breasts, you may as well cook 6. A tiny bit more prep time, maybe 5 minutes, absolute max. But if you're going to put the effort in, like, I make a risotto quite often, and I use a lot of seasoning, lump a huge amount of seasoning in, trying to give it that flavour. Stock cubes, things like that as well, can really be helpful to bump up like something like a rice or a pasta if you think it's bland. But instead of cooking one portion or two, I cook 4 or 6, whack it in the Tupperware, and then it's just there. It's ready to go.
That's usually, like, we kind of talk about these things. Here's how much protein you should be getting, and here's where you get it from, and that's never usually the problem. It's like, oh God, I keep forgetting, I'm just not eating enough. It's preparing, isn't it?
Yeah,
and like, if you're like, most people are pretty good at having protein in dinner. It seems to be the one area, because it's just like this Irish culture. You have your meat and veg or whatever it is, or what people just think or give themselves enough time to make dinner. So that's a good time to make your lunch the next day. Yeah. Like you said, big chicken stir fry or a big stir fry of any sort. Double up the batch, put it in the lunchbox for the next day, and get into that habit, because it's hard to get good quality protein on the go. It has to be a full fill bar or a packet of chicken from Tesco, which just doesn't quite stack up. So be preparing in advance, think ahead.
And then if it does come down to grabbing something, you can also have, I tend to pick things up that are in the fridge that are just there, really just in case in those moments where like I literally only do have 10 minutes, I have to eat something. Like protein yogurts, protein bars, supplements, obviously whey protein powder, but even those little packets of chicken, stuff like that can be added to something, again, a bit of seasoning. It can make a huge difference instead of leaving yourself no time whatsoever, because we don't always have time to prep things. So if it has come down to that, it is handy just to have something in the fridge instead of just grabbing something really easily or going out and ordering a bag of chips or whatever it is. You can have your kind of plan B and plan C there as well, and it'll just make your life a million times easier. Like, okay, I will make something, it might be a bit bland, but it's better than going out and spending 15 quid on something that's not really going to help me out at all, you know.
And it needs to be, exactly like we said, eat as much real food as you can, get as much nutrients into your body as you can, get enough protein so that you hold on to muscle as we age, as we train, as we live our life. And the more muscle we have, the better everything is, realistically, right? It just makes you healthier, it makes you happier, you'll stay fuller, your diet will be easier, and you won't lose muscle as you work towards the body composition that you're trying to get. So that's the main reason. I think a lot of the time we know it, but we forget why we're doing it. And when you know why you're doing it, it makes it easier to make that effort to continue to do it. So yeah, that's why we wanted to come on and remind everyone to go eat your protein.
Eat your protein.
Eat your protein.
You won't get your pudding if you don't eat your meat.
Or you can.
Or your vegan option. You'll also get your vegan option pudding after.
It's great these days. Like, there's so many options now. Like, even in the last 5 to 10 years, like the amount of vegan option there is, it just makes life so much easier for vegans. But there is so many ways around it. We have so many vegetarians in the gym that are getting all of their protein intake that they need. You need to actually just think about it, sit down, plan it out. It doesn't have to be from meat, but it does have to come in, you know, especially if your body composition is an important goal to you, and also staying strong, staying fit, and reducing injury is just really important.
The simplest terms, I suppose, like you say there, no matter what your goal is, regardless of what it is, a good quality protein intake and strength training 3 times a week. If you're doing those 2 things, you're probably going to do pretty well.
Very good. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you all on the next podcast.
Bye.